Welcome to Cattle Connect, your insight into Alabama's beef cattle industry. I'm your host, Kayla Greer, and this is Cattle Connect, brought to you by the Alabama Cattlemen's Association. Happy New Year, and welcome to Season 2 of the Cattle Connect podcast. But I will say, the new year and the new season aren't the only things exciting happening around the office lately. Tomorrow is actually the association's 81st birthday. The ACA will turn 81 years old tomorrow. That's January 4th. So last year we celebrated a milestone birthday with 80 years, and Erin, it appears that we are headed boldly in the direction of a centennial birthday celebration.
We are excited to wish the Cattlemen's Association happy birthday.
And as the token history person in the office, I wanted to use this platform and our first episode of a new season to reflect on our past and highlight some of the major milestone moments and, most importantly, their little-known details. And we have a good friend here at the association. His name is Dan Hollis, and he wrote a history book that covers all of those moments and their stories. So today, Erin and I are going to read some of those excerpts directly from the book called It's Great to Be Number One. And if you like what you hear and you're frustrated because you don't get to hear more of the story, that's okay. You can hop on over to bamabeef.org/store to purchase your own copy and read at home. So that being said, you are going to hear some pages flipping today as Erin and I are literally sitting here with history books in hand because we are going to be reading some experts. But, you know, it's truly a book, Erin. We say this all the time that keeps giving.
Yeah, it's something that I know we reference a lot. Doesn't matter if we're, looking for a factoid or maybe just trying to, freshen our brain a little bit on some of our past. But this book has continued to be a great reference for us. And I know a lot of our leaders have enjoyed it as well because it really does go in depth as to some of the work done in the trenches back in the early days of the association, really in that time frame from 1944 when we were established, really up to that 1985 landmark.
Right. And speaking of association leaders, using it as a reference point, I'm looking over at the table at yours, and it's quite annotated and dog-eared and has notes written in it and Post-it notes sticking out of the top and the sides and the bottoms, and
it's a great
use that
book.
Pretty regular, huh?
I do. I use it. I like to look at it, and it's a great resource. I know we used it a lot when we were redoing the museum in 2019. It was, just something we referenced back a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, that being said, without further ado, the best place to begin is at the beginning, right? So if you fast forward back to the second episode of the Cattle Connect podcast last January, Erin and I did a deep dive of association history, and I want to say up front that this is not going to be a repeat of that episode. This is going to highlight some different moments in ACA history, but given that our birthday is tomorrow, I do think that it's appropriate to retell the story from that winter night in January of 1944. So as it is written in the book by Dan Hollis, It's Great to Be Number One. I'm going to start reading right here. It says, there had been a letter that had circulated around, and it called for a meeting of all interested cattlemen on the night of Tuesday, January 4th, 1944 at Demopolis, Alabama, to consider the organization of a viable cattlemen's association. The annual Alabama Beef Cattle Show and Sale was being held at Demopolis on January 4th, 5th, and 6th of that year, and many cattlemen would be in the Black Belt City for the state's premier beef cattle event. Some 55 to 60 cattlemen thus gathered on the evening of January 4th in the Demopolis Inn to consider organizing or reorganizing. U.C. Jenkins, as president of the Alabama Livestock Growers Association, presided over the historic meeting. The consensus of those present at the meeting was that the old Alabama Livestock Growers Association, or known as ALGA, would be laid aside and a new organization with a new name would be formed. State Senator R.J. Bob Lowe of Huntsville finally made the motion to reorganize the Alabama Cattlemen's Association, and the motion was seconded by Luther Fuller and passed without a dissenting vote among those present. And there you have it. The Cattlemen's Association was born that night, almost tomorrow, 81 years ago.
Well, what a night it was, because that really set the scene and really jump-started everything for the successes that the association has seen for the last 81 years. And Kayla, I wanted to take a minute, and for this first chapter that I want to focus on is going to be about membership, because from 1944, really those first 25 years, the focus really was on membership, because we started, I believe, with 44 members in Demopolis when ALGA got set aside and ACA formed. And what I would love for our members to know and those listeners is that from 1944 with 44 members until 1973 when we surpassed 18,600 members. That's a very short time frame to establish ourselves, get our membership up, and have the nation's largest state cattlemen's association.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely were kind of put on a pedestal for a while there. I mean, the book itself is called "It's Great to Be Number One," and we worked in it was about 30 years. In that time frame, we jumped to be the largest cattlemen's association, not just in the Southeast, but across the entire nation. And with that came a lot of growth and a lot of expansion. And I just, you go back to that night, gosh, what I would pay to be able to sit there in that room in 1944, knowing what I know now.
Right.
And just be a fly on the wall and realize what an amazing thing was happening. They had no idea what they were doing.
Yeah, for sure. And, the players that were there, thank goodness for that motion and second, first of all.
That's right.
That was a very important one. But just the fact that we were able to climb to over 18,600 members. And, the thing that I would point out is, it happened in a short amount of time, but when we reached the point of being the nation's largest state cattlemen's association, we actually held that for 15 straight years.
Wow.
So you're talking about another 15 years on top of that 1973 eclipse. Right. And so, membership is something that obviously it's our lifeblood and something that we hone in on a lot. And we were really proud to get to, almost 10,500 this year. But boy, can you imagine if we got back to like over that 16,000?
We would have, we'd be getting real close to the number of cattle farms in the state of Alabama. We'd have a feather in our cap of saying that every cattle farm in Alabama was a member.
Yeah, it just fantastic. And definitely, if you've got a chance to read this book, reading through some of the paragraphs that just talks about that climb and eclipsing on that number, it's really interesting. Here's a little factoid. That year that we got, the highest amount ever, 18,620, the largest county cattlemen's chapter that year was Barber County.
Wow.
They broke, and it's written here in the book, Barber County barely broke its old record in 1974 with 1,135 members.
Good gracious, in Barber County.
Barber County. So credit to Barber County, largest, probably the largest county chapter in the history of the ACA at that point.
And keep reading a little bit. Doesn't it mention some of the other counties, and just so we can hear some of the numbers?
It does. So that particular year, 1974, following Barber County was Chilton County with 619, Marshall County with 591, Montgomery with 574, and Madison with 462.
Wow. And still some of those chapters are some of our bigger chapters here in the state, but I don't think they boast those same numbers today. But hey, it's a good goal.
Yeah, and the members will like this. At that point, just another little factoid, $5 a year per membership.
Wow.
So, of course, today we're at $50. But,
inflation.
That's right.
The dollar's not the same anymore.
So, I guess I'll just start with that, a little membership. So, where should we go from there?
Yeah. So, if we're going to house members, then we need somewhere to house them, right? And all these meetings that we're going to have as an association. So, let's talk a little bit about the building and its history.
Well, the building is another really incredible story. And again,
it's one that I'm going to admit, I have not read this book fully cover to cover. I have read lots of pieces of it and chapters of it, but I really need to sit down and read it cover to cover. But until today, or as we prepared for this episode, was not a section I have ever really read. So it was very interesting to me.
The age-old question, what's for dinner? Maybe it's ground beef tacos or sirloin steak kebabs. What about beef chili, meatloaf, or sloppy joes? With hundreds of recipes on beef, it's what'sfordinner.com. The next time that question comes up, you'll know the answer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Funded by beef farmers and ranchers.
Yeah, so as you read through it, just to kind of like bring everybody on the ride with us, essentially the association worked out of the Chamber of Commerce for many years. And so our first executive vice president, Mr. Ham Wilson, he originally was an employee of the Chamber and started doing some work with the cattlemen, really influential and instrumental in those early years of gathering those members and selling memberships. And, of course, it came to a point where they said, we've got to get some infrastructure in place.
Right.
And, they wanted to do it in Montgomery because obviously, the capital city facility and all that good stuff. And I'm going to go to page 164 here in the book. There's a great, I'm going to paraphrase maybe just a little bit, but if y'all indulge me, I'm going to read about this other very important motion that was made. So it says, when the board of directors of the Alabama Cattlemen's Association met in Montgomery on September 26, 1962, one thing was patently clear. The association needed to, quote, get out on its own. It was no longer just a loose-knit group of forward-looking cattlemen. It was a force to be reckoned with. It had outgrown its clothes and needed some new ones. The directors knew they could no longer impose on the facilities and staff of the State Chamber of Commerce to do part of the work of the association. They did what they had to do. They took the bold step of declaring their intention to build the future of their association, quote, separate and apart from the State Chamber. That action by the ACA directors meant several things. It meant finding some suitable office space for the association outside of the State Chamber building. It meant hiring a full-time staff and paying their salaries in full. They started by hiring Ham Wilson away from the State Chamber as the ACA's full-time executive vice president. Office space was rented at 608 Adams Avenue. Both of these actions were to be effective January 1st, 1963. And at that same September meeting, a, quote, building fund committee was named to solicit funds to build our own building.
Wow. Another room I would have liked to been sitting in.
Man, to be a fly on the wall. So 2 huge things happening at that meeting. You know, one, you say, hey, we've got to get our infrastructure. Let's move forward with the steps to get a building. But then number 2, we're going to have a staff.
Yeah.
And we're going to hire someone, and we're going to really commit to this thing. So,
we're going to stand on our own 2 feet.
Man, what a great move by those leaders. And, of course, we know today the building, as you go through the chapter here, it talks about the building fund committee that was established. They raised the funds. The land was purchased. It says that the original there, we were at 608 Adams Avenue for some rented office space.
Right.
I find it ironic, Kayla, that we actually ended up with
we bought the space next door.
Yeah, we essentially bought the neighboring property because the original building, the way it was positioned, it was at 600 Adams Avenue.
Yeah, and what Erin means by that is so originally when the first version of the Cattlemen's Association building was built, where our front door now faces the parking lot and kind of it faces the southward direction, it used to face north toward the state capitol. And if you've ever been to the building, which I hope many of our listeners have, if you haven't, please stop by one day. But if you've ever been and you know where my office sits, my office window was actually the front door of the building. And so whereas now you enter from the south side, you used to enter from the north side. And that's just a really ironic thing. I agree, because I even think I read at some point, Erin, that they were trying to decide between lots. And it was between the 608 address or the 600 Adams Avenue address that they were going to purchase.
It makes me want to go out right now and walk Adams because, on one side of us, Kayla, we've got the road builders. Mm-hmm. And on the other side across the street here, we've got State Superintendents Association.
Right. And between us and the road builders is the archives parking lot.
Right.
So
I wonder if that's actually what became. That would be something just to research. But
yeah, just a fun little fact. But yeah, March 1964, furniture was moved into the new building. And on April 16th, it was the official dedication day. And Erin's talking about her factoids. This was a fun factoid. It says the total cost of the land, building, and all the furnishings was about $79,000.
I'll take that deal today.
Again, inflation. But we've done pretty good here at the building. It's the location of it, and we just
second to none.
We've mentioned before, and actually last week's episode, as we alluded to some of the changes and updates and revisions that were made to the building over the course of last year. You mentioned that some of your friends call it the Taj Mahal.
The Taj Mahal, that's
of Cattlemen's Associations. I stand by that. And to think that the Taj Mahal started in 1964. Well, then 10 years later, in 1974. The book says we began to, quote, bulge at the seams because we had that record membership of 18,620 members that year. And we needed more building for what was the nation's largest cattlemen's association at the time. So for 10 years, we lived in that 1 to 2 story, 1 story with a basement.
1 story with a basement, yeah. That's not that much time, though.
Yeah, no.
I'm just thinking through, within
a
decade, they were talking about going up with it.
Building more, adding expansion, And, originally, the downstairs basement was supposed to be rented commercial space, something that could be a source of revenue for the association. But they quickly said, I think we're going to need that space. We might not ought to rent that out. So that was a fun little thing that I didn't realize. But then in comes 1958 and the third floor.
Yeah. Yeah, the space that we use so much today. And, of course, our partner organization, our sister organization, Southeastern Livestock Exposition, had a huge part in our ability to go ahead and, add on to the building, create the third floor space, which is a great meeting space today. And so the Southeastern, they're just coming right alongside the ACA. And, of course, the headquarter building here is home to both organizations today as it still stands. So, as you kind of look through these, see some of the old pictures as I'm sitting here looking, it really is interesting to see that timeline and just know that in a pretty short amount of time, once again, we really grew at a fast pace.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about associations and their buildings especially, to consider that within a decade's time, this one had expanded so much. It really is. I mean, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it kind of is. And then by 83, we had the Southeastern Livestock Exposition had purchased the lot behind us, and
which, of course, today is our parking lot.
Which is one of the hottest commodities in downtown Montgomery.
Right.
And the book actually references that. It says, and I quote, was paved as additional parking space for the ACA and SLE headquarters building, parking space that is particularly valuable on Capitol Hill.
I'd say probably a little more valuable today even.
It's even more valuable now that there's more buildings around, and we get calls all the time. And I would like to just throw out that right here, right now, while you're listening, if you're a member of the Cattlemen's Association and you're coming to downtown Montgomery, park in our lot.
Come park. Just let Lee know downstairs that it's your truck. But if you've got a cattleman tag on it, you're good to go.
That's right. We certainly won't be towing away anybody that's got a beef tag on the front. But yeah, that's your lot, your building. So please, we invite you guys to come and see this. If we've jogged your curiosity and you're like, man, what is that building about? Please stop by and see it, because it has grown. We're not going to talk about it too much, but we've got the museum downstairs that came about in the 90s.
Right.
And then that third floor addition that we just talked about that came about in 74, it is home to the Alabama Livestock Hall of Fame. It has a huge rental space with a big auditorium where you can seat about 250, allegedly, according to fire code. But
yeah, I wouldn't do that.
But definitely 100 to 150 could sit up there and eat.
That's the sweet spot.
And there's booths that just go further into the history of the ACA and highlight the important people that have been a part of our association over the years. And so there's just so much to see here. And if you're a member, please, here's my plea. Please come and see the building. Stop by, come meet your staff, park in the parking lot, explore the museum, all those things, because this building is, as it's been called, the Taj Mahal of cattlemen's associations across the nation.
Yeah. We'd love to have you come by. So, I mean, Kayla, we can't really talk about all this historical part of the ACA without talking about beef promotion. And there's a particular group that is really, really important when we start talking about beef promotion. And I think you had a point that you wanted to share on that.
Yeah. So we can't talk about the Cattlemen's Association without talking about the Cattle Women's Association. And before they were the Cattle Women's Association, they were lovingly known as the Cowbells.
The Cowbells.
And so they were organized in 1953, but didn't really get incorporated into the association until 1974. And I'm going, again, straight back to the history book. I'm going to read a little excerpt here. It says, aside from the beef promotion law and its stockyard collections of funds, certainly one of the most important contributions to beef promotion has come from the Alabama Cowbells. These women have come up with their own ideas. They have grabbed ideas of the cattlemen, and they have not let any opportunity pass them by to promote the beef cattle industry in their state. I'm kind of paraphrasing. I'm jumping ahead real quick. So this is just talking about how they supported the efforts of the association. And then it goes on to say, in 1955, the Cowbells initiated their own program with the purchase of 5,000 Beef for Father's Day stickers to be distributed in early June. That was the small beginning of what turned out to be a mammoth promotion program. And that it was, because we are still promoting Beef for Father's Day today.
Yeah, we are. And I might add, the original 10-cent beef checkoff, those funds originally were used for bumper stickers.
Right.
And so stickers apparently were a big thing back in those days.
Stickers were a big thing. And so going back to the book, the next fantastic idea for promotion from the Cowbells was in the inauguration of a beef cook-off in 1961. And that was truly the start of something big, beginning with the senior high beef cook-off in 1961, followed by a junior high beef cook-off. And the Alabama Cowbell's Beef Cook-Off, which was for adults, beginning in 1972, and then the Alabama National Beef Cook-Off launched in 1981. And Erin, as you mentioned, as we were talking through our show notes here, I'm just going to read out of here. And out of these Alabama Cowbell-sponsored cook-offs came the inspiration for establishing the National Beef Cook-Off by the American National Cowbells in 1974.
Yeah, that was a really important part in the history, because I can remember when I was hired at the ACA, so I started in 2010, and at that point, the American National Cattlewomen still had a very large presence with the National Beef Cook-Off. I know Lana Slayton and Evelyn Green, they both have served as American National Cattlewomen presidents, and, they were really involved in that as they were coming up through the ranks and serving, and so, that particular event and program, it stemmed from people taking a look at Alabama. And so, again, just kind of blazing the trail. That's what you see as you read through
so
this.
So many examples of that here in the book and in the association history of Alabama kind of being the first one to make the move and then being the model child for other programs that would grow on a national level. I'm going to keep reading because there's one program that the Cowbells took ownership of that we absolutely cannot leave off the list. And it says, and one more prominent beef promotion program unique to Alabama that has attracted the combined talents of the cattlemen and the Cowbells is October Beef Month in Alabama. And it has been responsible for boosting the sale of beef throughout Alabama's retail outlets and attracted the cooperation of supermarkets and restaurants all over the state. Much of the legwork responsible for this brilliant success of this program has been done by the devoted Cowbells giving of their time and energy. So, to all of our cattlewomen that are out there listening, thank you for all your hard work in promoting beef. And if you are interested in learning more about the Alabama Cattlewomen's Association and the Cowbells' history, contact their president, Shelby Easterling. We will actually be airing a show with Shelby here in the next couple of weeks, so you can learn more about it there. And she would love to talk to you about joining that branch of the association.
There's a birthday right around the corner, and you have no idea what to get. Might we suggest the one thing people simply can't get enough of? A homemade beef dinner. It could be a juicy ribeye, a hearty beef stew, braised short ribs, or your mom's meatloaf. Nothing says I love you like reminding someone they love beef. Together, we bring more. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Funded by beef farmers and ranchers.
And so all of this has been documented, not only in this book, Erin, but over the years it's been documented in, the Alabama Cattleman magazine. And that is something that just, it would feel totally wrong to leave that off the list of milestones for the association as we celebrate the birthday and all the things that have been accomplished in 81 years. So tell us what you know about the magazine.
Yeah, the magazine, it also has some really neat excerpts about it. We did not begin with a magazine in the 40s and 50s. It was something that came about that the leadership at the time, they said, we really need something that's going to allow us to communicate with members, because at that time they had annual meetings. Mm-hmm. And so, today we're so blessed with all this technology to be able to communicate. But, back then you really had only a couple of options.
Right.
And so this is I found this to be pretty interesting. I'm going to, again, just read a little bit of the excerpt. But on August 14th, 1952, in a board of directors meeting in Montgomery, Johnny Jenkins offered to solicit ACA members for subscriptions to his Southern Livestock Journal at $1 per year, still to be the official publication of the ACA, and to rebate 50 cents for each subscription to the ACA. Secretary Wilson, which of course is Mr. Ham Wilson, was directed to negotiate with Jenkins in an effort to, quote, get a better offer. And he did too. Wilson reported to the board of directors at their meeting on December 4th, 1952, that Jenkins had offered to send Southern Livestock Journal as the official publication of the ACA for each member for 25 cents per year.
Man.
The directors recognized a good deal when they saw one and accepted the offer for a 3-year period. Now, I have always been told that Mr. Ham Wilson was, a real good talker. He could sell anything.
He could sell anything.
Apparently, he was quite the negotiator, too. So that was a pretty good deal.
75% off the deal.
Exactly. So
off of a pretty good deal, I might add.
Yeah, $1 doesn't, that's very very cheap to us, but I'm sure back then they were like, no, we can do better than that, apparently. So, but then it goes on from there, and it talks about how the board then met in 1954. And, the leadership at the time, they decided, hey, it's time for us to, again, kind of get out on our own.
Yeah.
Yep. We've got the staff. We've got the membership. And so they voted to change what they had at the time, a newsletter, to a 4-page publication rather than a 1-sheet newsletter.
4-page.
And it would be published quarterly. And so they rocked along with that for a couple of years. And, the association was growing. And it says on December 11th, 1956, the executive committee of the association authorized the production of the quarterly publication to be called the Alabama Cattleman, and to consist of 8 to 12 pages in size. I wish we could do 8 to 12 pages.
Can we get back to that? No, we'd be missing out on so much good content that they didn't have back then, but that we have at our fingertips now, thanks to, like you said, technology.
Yeah, and we've got advertising, we've got all the good stuff. So obviously the story goes on from there to talk about how it moved to a monthly publication. And of course, today we know that the Alabama Cattleman is published monthly, and it's one of our best member benefits.
And I think one of the fun little history moments in the book there, it was talking about how for the longest time, like its key thing was that the inside was black and white, but that the cover was full color. And so that was an interesting little tidbit, because that was like its signature, that was the Alabama Cattleman magazine, because the cover was in color.
That's right. Yeah, that was really, as it says here, the start of something big. And it's funny, I just saw this little note in here. It says, Ham Wilson had assured the directors it could be done. It would more than likely, quote, pay its own way. They said that sounded like a good deal. And they authorized the monthly publication of the Alabama Cattleman.
Wow.
So there you go.
And what time frame was that?
That would be, we're at 1958 at that point.
Okay.
So
there it began. So every month since the year 1958.
Every month.
There has been a publication of the Alabama Cattleman magazine.
Yeah, 58 was a big year. That was when Mr. Jim Adams was coming along in the leadership, and so a lot of big things happening then. So the association again just moving and shaking, and Mr. Hollis here just has such a way with words in this book.
He does.
It is interesting to just kind of read through it and. Yeah, the magazine, it's definitely been a staple for the association in addition to the other things we've talked about today.
And there are so many other milestone moments. We don't have time, unfortunately, Erin, to cover everything. There's legislation that could be talked about. There's staff people that could be talked about. We've mentioned Ham Wilson, but there's others that could be mentioned as notably important to the association. There are now past events, but current events at the time that would have been just key moments in history for the ACA. I mentioned earlier there's the formation of the museum and that whole Capitol building campaign that went along with that. And
that would have to be in chapter 2 of the book, edition number 2, because that has not been written in the form of a history book yet. But at some point we're going to get a lot of pressure. The more we talk about this thing,
I'm already feeling the pressure. It's self-imposed maybe, but I'm feeling some pressure personally, because I can't imagine in 20 and 30 more years, somebody coming in behind me and not having this reference point that I've leaned on so much in my role as in communications, and I know you have in your role. But like I said, there are just so many other moments in history of the ACA that are just so important. There's the beef checkoff coming into play. There's all these things that happened in the early 2000s and the 2010s that unfortunately our little podcast just can't cover in one episode. But if you're a dedicated listener, you may notice that there is an absence of something, and that it's that there are no news or fast facts coming your way. And that is because, given that unlike our Cattleman magazine, this is a digital platform of communication, I have access to analytics about our listeners' behaviors. And because of that access, I know that many of you, or shall I say most, only listen to about 70% of our episodes, which would account for the content, but not the fast facts. So we are going to put those on a little sabbatical for now, and we're going to analyze the data to see if our listen through numbers go up a little higher. If you hate this idea, though, please let me know, and I'll factor that into the data. Or if you have an idea for a replacement for the fast facts, get with me. I want to hear it. Just call the office and ask for me, Kayla Greer. But don't worry, we won't let important updates slip by without a trace, like the fact that the convention registration early bird discount deadline is coming up on January 17th. We'll throw in important information like that along the way so that you don't forget. You see how I did that? Well, in the words of a legend, that's all, folks. We'll get back to you next week for more Cattle Connect podcast. And in the meantime, happy birthday, ACA. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Cattle Connect, brought to you by the Alabama Cattlemen's Association. Be sure to subscribe to get notified when our next episode goes live. And until next time, remember, beef, it's what's for dinner.